The cleanup continues after this weekend's historic rainfall. We are live in Mississauga tonight, where the hardest hit areas received 170 millimeters of rain.
Well, a major downtown intersection, it's off limits for the next week. We're going to tell you why Bloor and St. George is closed and what residents and homeowners have to say about it.
Plus, an investigation into a Toronto ferry crash that injured several people 2 years ago found a number of safety deficiencies. We'll have the latest coming up.
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Live at 5. Today is the first day of a week-long closure on a major downtown intersection.
So for more on why Bloor and St. George is closed and also the impact that it's having on businesses in the area, let's go live to CP24. Steve, Ron, Steve, you've been there all day. You've been talking to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right, Bakari and Lena, and all the people that I spoke with throughout the day are pleased with the improvements that are taking place on Bloor Street between Avenue Road and Spadina. The intersection at St. George's is being built into a protected intersection, meaning that there's going to be a separation between the cyclists and the cars. The concern that most people have is the amount of time they say that it's taken to get to this stage. So this whole area is going to be closed for 1 week, starting today, up until August the 26th. And that's going to be for repaving of the road, enhancing the sidewalks, the bike lanes. There's going to be better access to those that need accessibility to the sidewalk or the roadways. And there's going to be pots and plants that are going to be put on both sides of the road. So it's going to look great, but it is going to be a bit of an inconvenience for people in the area. Now, I did speak with a local business owner and I spoke with a cyclist. Both were happy with the improvements that are taking place, but both questioned how long it took to get to this point. Here's more reaction from the two of them. Let's listen.
I just wonder if this could be done faster. We've had 2 years of COVID and 2 years of construction on Bloor Street. Bloor Street was closed west, was closed east. There's no parking. We've allowed for immense amount of cycling, and as you see, I'm a cyclist myself, but the cyclists really need this type of real estate. Is anyone asking the questions? Is anyone really looking at the studies? Can we do this faster? And we're left to believe what we read and when the press releases that they give us. All I'm asking is, can we do this better? And has anyone asked that question? And I don't believe that's happened.
They're putting a curve in. It's a great idea. I love going along Bloor Street. You know, the new bike lanes that are coming in that are more than just a painted line are way safer, right? But the length of time that it's taking to do the project just amazes me, because this intersection has been messed up now all summer long.
This sign, thanks to the City of Toronto, shows an artistic rendering of what the intersection is going to look like. And if we zoom into the photo here, you can see that there's going to be barriers on all four corners of the intersection. That's going to separate the cyclists from the cars, and it's going to add that extra bit of security for those cyclists as they go along Bloor Street West. I'll send it back to you guys.
Reporting live tonight, Steve. Thanks so much. Staying on the roads, it's 5:03, 16 degrees. Let's get a check on the evening commute now with our traffic specialist, Adjoa Nsiayebwa.
Yes, Lena, it's been a busy afternoon, and watching problems that you've been with us for over 2 hours. On the westbound lanes of the 401 in the Express, on the approach to the 410 through the construction zone. Collision blocking the only lane getting by, so cars are being forced to use the right shoulder. Rest of the 401 haven't spotted any other issues, but definitely a busy drive across the top of the city. Continues slow further east as you make your way in towards Durham. Don Valley delays, Don Mills up to the 401, and Jam to the Garden as you make your way out of and head into downtown. On city streets, a couple of problems on Danforth. We have those wires down. Danforth shut down between Greenwood and Byron as well. Stretch of Danforth shut down between Pape all the way over towards Jones. That is for a very serious collision. I'll send it back to you.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
And cleanup continues after this weekend's historic rainfall, which flooded roads. It also prompted several water rescues.
CP24's Melissa Duggan joins us live from one of the hardest hit areas in Mississauga. Where are you and what are you seeing, Melissa?
So, Lena, if you would have seen some of those videos from over the weekend of Queen Frederica and Dundas in Mississauga, which is where I am right now, what we're standing beside right now is the remnants from all of that water. I'm in a basement parking garage now of an apartment building, and there is still a bit of a lake, a pond behind me here. Some cars still parked in it, and work still underway days after that storm hit on Saturday, still trying to get all of this water out of this building. We saw hoses working hard to pump it out, but obviously still a lot of work ahead for them. I've been talking to people who live in this building too. They've been telling me what they experienced when this storm hit over the weekend. By the way, the second big rainfall they've experienced in about a month. Here's what one resident told me.
I actually work nearby here, and so, it was time to clock out. I was going to come home, and then I found out I can't come home because, the flood was so severe. My boss drove me down as near as we could get, obviously, because it was dangerous to get any further. And we saw people flooding, and they're getting pulled out with ropes from the fire trucks, and it was an insane view.
So that's Abdul there. He was telling me his parents were inside their apartment while he was outside, talking to him on the phone saying, yeah, it's not safe for you to be able to make your way in here at this time. He eventually was able to get home safely. But yeah, this historic rainfall, 128 millimeters recorded at Pearson on Saturday. That is a record, and more rain also fell on Sunday as well. I'm just going to look out for my camera operator here. There's a car actually coming into this parking lot right now. Okay, we're all right. We were talking with Environment Canada a little earlier today. Jeff Colson talking about just how wet this summer has been. Here he is.
With Saturday's number added into the total for June, July, and August, we've now shattered the season record at Pearson Airport. This is the wettest June, July, and August we've ever had at Pearson, because on the heels of the rainfall that we got on Saturday, we also had the huge rainfalls in July, making July the wettest month ever at Pearson, with rainfall in the middle of the month from one thunderstorm after another, with the remnants of Hurricane Beryl that moved through earlier in July. So all of these things put together has made this the wettest June, July, and August ever at Pearson. And unfortunately, we still got some time left in the month of August to add to that total.
Yeah, and people here in Mississauga sure are feeling that right about now. Now, as for the city of Mississauga, they're saying they're still conducting some cleanup work. They're clearing out debris from drainage pipes, that sort of thing, making sure that if there is more rain in the near future, which looks like there isn't any in the forecast this week, things will be okay. Anyone with a flooded basement, by the way, Lena and Bakari, they're being told they could call 311, get some advice that way. Back to you.
Yeah, lots of people with flooded basements in Mississauga, that's for sure. Some dramatic images coming out of that city as well. Melissa, thanks so much for this. Let's stay with the wet weather for a moment, because we're now learning last month's flooding in Toronto is estimated to have caused $940 million in insured damage.
So it's been quite the summer for Canada's insurers. They've been impacted by floods, storms, and wildfires, as well as the recent tornado, an air, and the water main break in Montreal. So last year, the Insurance Bureau of Canada paid out $3.1 billion in damages caused by severe weather. So for comparison, between 2001 and 2010, Canadian insurers averaged $675 million a year in weather-related losses.
And heavy smoke over Barrie today after a fire broke out at a scrapyard.
Okay, so the fire, that was at Tiffin Street, west of Highway 400 in central Barrie. So the fire was reported before noon. Crews report that it involves a large pile of scrap vehicles. No injuries have been reported, but area businesses, they were evacuated.
It's now 5:09, 16 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, a Dundas Street building that was on the brink of collapsing last week. It was declared unsafe a decade ago.
Welcome back. A report on the crash of a Toronto Island ferry 2 years ago found several safety deficiencies. The Transportation Safety Board concluded the Sam McBridge ferry, which was carrying more than 900 passengers on August 20th, 2022, approached the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal at too high a speed and with only one propeller running, couldn't stop quick enough. More than a dozen people had minor injuries, mostly from slips or falls. The TSB made several recommendations, including better safety protocol and improved training for crew members.
Ferry vessel crew members need to have the knowledge and skills related to crowd management and human behavior in emergencies. None of the crew members of the Sam McBride had received such training, and nor were they required to.
Our investigation determined that if there had been a fire on board or a need to evacuate the vessel, there would not be enough crew members to effectively respond. Crew members would have to be in 2 places at once. 3 crew members would be assigned to respond to the emergency, leaving only 3 crew members to oversee the management of over 900 passengers and the possible evacuation of all people on board. While thankfully there were few serious injuries reported and the accident happened close to shore, if an emergency had arisen over the course of the voyage, the crew and those on board will not have been properly prepared.
The TSB did note that the city had already increased the size of the Sam McBride's crew and addressed passenger safety issues, including updating the pre-recorded safety briefings, adding additional signage, and warning passengers to not stand on the stairs while the vessel is moving. A Kensington Market building that was on the brink of collapse last week was declared unsafe a decade ago. The building on Dundas near Augusta had to be partially demolished. This after it started leaning on Friday. Records show the owner was issued an order to fix it back in 2014 after an inspection found that various residential units were added to the building without a permit. Crews had to tear down the exterior walls and remove the roof, and the city is now determining whether the structure is safe.
The wall is cracked.
Yeah.
And this, at the morning, I wake up and I heard a very loud noise, and the wall is had a crack on bottom open, and we ran off of the building.
They smelled some kind of burning smoke or something, or saw some flames. But at the same time, the fact that if you look inside of the building, there's no burning residue.
A lot of these buildings are really unsafe.
Does that concern you?
It does, in a way, of course.
Firefighters were called to the scene at 10 o'clock Friday morning after construction workers in the area observed the sagging facade. Luckily, no injuries were reported.
Well, Premier Doug Ford addressed the Association of Municipalities of Ontario today in Ottawa. So Ford touted Ontario's economic growth under his government and also spoke about connecting municipalities with international investors and renewing recreational facilities.
Through our new partner portal, municipalities will be able to upload information about commercial and industrial properties in their communities and provide companies with information about the property, including demographic trends, market analysis, and First Nations treaty areas. It's going to be a powerful resource to help local governments and communities attract investments and jobs.
Well, opposition leaders also attending AMO today. They spoke about the need for more provincial support for roads, homelessness, and addiction, while promising also new funding deals.
And for so many of you, I want to thank you too, because you've been fighting for solutions, for urgent help to save lives. But it is simply not acceptable that you, our local leaders, our municipalities, have been left to deal with this on your own. That has to stop. Right? That has to stop.
What you need is long-term, sustainable, reliable funding to fund your operations. And so we'll deliver the tools you need to deliver the programs and the services that you need and to build the communities that your residents are demanding. And I'm committed to doing that work with you when we form government.
Downloading, lack of infrastructure funding, and the rising cost of climate is putting an unsustainable burden on municipal budgets. And as Premier, I promise that a Green government will change that. Instead of downloading blame and cost on the municipalities, Greens will partner with you on a new deal for cities and towns as we work together to build a fair, caring, climate-ready Ontario.
And the AMO conference continues in Ottawa through Wednesday.
It is now 5:16, 18 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, it's day one of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. U.S. President Joe Biden will make a keynote speech tonight in front of an estimated 5,000 delegates.
Welcome back. We take you to Chicago now, where Kamala Harris will officially secure the Democratic presidential nomination this week as the party gathers for its national convention.
U.S. President Joe Biden will make a keynote speech tonight in front of an estimated 5,000 delegates. This is all happening at the United Center. The former presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are expected to appear at the DNC. That'll be later this week. And Harris will close out the convention Thursday by formally accepting the Democratic nomination. Party members will also sign off on the Democratic platform. Well, Democratic National Convention Committee Executive Director Alex Hornbrook talked to reporters today about what to expect at the gathering.
We've been building the stage, literally and figuratively, here in Chicago for Democrats to tell our story directly to the American people. Tonight's theme, For the People, will showcase Kamala Harris's commitment to fighting for everyday Americans, because at its core, the Harris-Walz ticket is a ticket for the people. And we'll also be honoring, of course, President Joe Biden. We would not be here without him.
And Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson says preparations have been made to make sure the event runs smoothly and safely.
Our police superintendent has worked diligently, not just with our local police department, but with local departments as well as the Secret Service and federal agencies for the last several months. And that collaborative approach is truly the spirit of who we are in this city. But we also could not have done this without the hard work of the everyday Chicagoans.
And CTV News chief political correspondent Vashi Capellos, she's in Chicago and she has more on the presidential race.
There's no escaping the fact that I think what we've all been able to witness north of the border, as well as people who are attending this convention, the race has fundamentally shifted in the last month since Joe Biden did make that decision to step aside. I was just saying earlier, like, I left the RNC thinking it's going to be almost impossible to beat Trump. Like, it felt like he had a lock on this thing because his voters were so incredibly motivated. Now Kamala Harris has, it seems, according to polling, closed that enthusiasm gap, which certainly, as I said, fundamentally changes the race.
And pro-Palestinian demonstrators gathered near the DNC in Chicago, calling on the Biden administration to stop providing arms to Israel. Many holding signs calling out the government's response to the ongoing war in Gaza. A police line was created to keep the demonstrators separated from another group of people waving Israeli flags.
Make no mistake, Joe Biden can turn off that tap of money and funding immediately. He could do it right now. He could have done it back in October.
Okay, and here at home, a new Maru public opinion poll finds that nearly 2/3 of Canadians are following the race for the White House. A quarter of respondents say they're doing so very closely. 40% see Kamala Harris as the front runner, while 20% believe former President Trump will return to the Oval Office. 23% say that the race is too close to call, while 17% have no idea which candidate will win.
Next, we'll take you to the Middle East, where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israel has accepted a proposal to bridge differences holding up a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. He called on Hamas to do the same without saying whether the latest draft had addressed concerns cited by the militant group. He also didn't say whether the latest proposal addressed Israel's demands for control over 2 strategic corridors inside Gaza, which Hamas has said is a non-starter. Blinken spoke after meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the country's defense minister today.
These are still complex issues, and they're going to require hard decisions by the leaders. Ultimately, it comes down to those decisions, but there is, I think, a real sense of urgency here, across the region, on the need to get this over the finish line and to do it as soon as possible. The United States is deeply committed to getting this job done, to getting it done now. Blinken is expected to travel to Egypt and Qatar tomorrow.
Global Affairs Canada says at least one Canadian has died after a super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily. 12 passengers and 10 crew were on board when the luxury yacht hit a violent storm. Local authorities say one body was recovered, 15 people were rescued, and 6 remain unaccounted for tonight. The search continues by air and by water. The surveillance footage shows just how strong the storm system was when it tore through Palermo overnight. And British tech giant Mike Lynch and his lawyer are among the 6 people missing. His wife among the 15 people who were rescued. Lynch was acquitted in June in a major U.S. fraud trial that was brought by HP after it acquired his tech firm Autonomy.
Well, Canada is committing $1 million to help Africa fight mpox. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says that the funds will go to the World Health Organization as it tries to contain the spread of the virus. Joly's visiting a vaccination coordination center in Ivory Coast. This is ahead of a visit to South Africa for 2 days starting Wednesday. And Canada is currently crafting a long-delayed strategy on how to engage with the continent. Well, General Motors is slashing hundreds of jobs worldwide. GM says it's laying off more than 1,000 salaried employees in its software and service units. The automaker says about half of the job cuts will be in the U.S., but it's not clear how many positions in Canada will be affected. The company claims that the move is not to bring costs down, but is being made in response to a review of operations and an attempt to prioritize investments that'll have the greatest impact. And it appears that incomes are not keeping up with inflation across the country. Statistics Canada says that the median family after-tax income was nearly $61,000. That was in 2022. That was down 4% from the previous year after adjusting for an inflation rate of almost 7%. Single-parent families with a parent under 25 saw the largest decrease in income adjusted to inflation at about 15%.
It is now 5:25, 18 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
Longtime TV talk show host Phil Donahue has died at 88 after a long illness. We're going to take a look back at his life and legacy. That's next.
Well, some sad news to share with you today. Longtime TV talk show host Phil Donahue has died.
Yeah, a statement from his family to the Today Show says that Donahue died last night after a long illness, surrounded by his family, including his wife of 44 years, Marla Thomas. He was considered one of the most influential talk show hosts of all time. And his show was among the first to tackle controversial issues on daytime TV. It ran for 29 years. And film critic Richard Krause reflected on what made Donahue such a pioneering TV personality.
Back when he started in 1967 with his talk show, On in the afternoon was seen as kind of the bastion of housewives. There were soap operas and shows like that. There weren't a lot of news programs or television shows that catered to an audience that cared about current events. And then along came Donahue, and he brought that into living rooms on a daily basis.
And earlier this year, Donahue was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Biden. He was 88 years old.
Right now it's 5:29, 18 degrees. This is Live at 5.
The cleanup continues tonight. After this weekend's historic rainfall, we're live with the very latest. Stay with us as our coverage continues.
A major downtown intersection is off limits for the next week. We're going to tell you why Bloor and St. George is closing, what residents and homeowners have to say about it.
Well, the cleanup continues after this weekend's historic rainfall. We're live in Mississauga tonight, where the hardest hit areas received 170 millimeters of rainfall.
And an investigation into a Toronto ferry crash that injured several people 2 years ago found a number of safety deficiencies.
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latifat.
And I'm Bakari Savage. A single vehicle crash shut down a stretch of the Danforth this afternoon.
This modified Ford Model T lost control and crashed into a tree and restaurant patio on Danforth. That's east of Pape. Some wires also came down and the vehicle caught fire. The driver was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries.
Well, cleanup continues after this weekend's historic rainfall, which flooded roads and prompted several water rescues.
Melissa Duggan joins us live from one of the hardest hit areas in Mississauga. Melissa.
Lena, we are still talking about that wild weather that hit over the weekend. Environment Canada telling CP24 about double a month's worth of rain falling in just the span of a few hours. Pearson recording about 128 millimeters of rain on Saturday. That is a record breaker of a day. I'm in an area of Mississauga right now where they saw a whole lot of flooding over the weekend. It's at Queen Frederica and Dundas. This intersection here, very hard hit. A number of stores in the area, they were forced to close because of that wet weather. And also the buildings that surround me here, they were hard hit as well. Some of the main floors saw water move in. Basement parking garages also flooded, and that work continued today. We've been watching it go on for a few hours here, just trying to pump that water out still from the weekend. Talking to some residents who live nearby too, saying they were just amazed to see how quickly it all moved in. Have a listen.
Oh, this weekend it was really, really fast. I went in for a shower maybe 15, 20 minutes, and it was literally river rafting going down my street. I was like, oh my goodness, because the first flood that happened here, it took about a good like maybe 2 hours to accumulate, but this time it was like really rapid.
City has to work out something because this street has been grown since within 30 days. Again, the river, I don't know where is the river. I just go to work and come back home. I don't go to rivers. So I don't know what to say. But there should be, the city has to work out. City has to work out. Please raise a concern that how many, 16 floor? How many residents? 4 floor, 8 apartments in whole floor, 1 floor. 8 by 16. So please do anything for us.
Dangerous conditions, too. A number of rescues happening over the weekend. First responders pulling people from trapped vehicles. So just, quite the weekend that happened here in Mississauga. But this wasn't the only place that saw extreme weather over the weekend. Ayr in Ontario, that's about an hour's drive west of Toronto, saw a tornado hit over the weekend, just carving a path of damage through that area as well. Cleanup there continues today. So quite the weekend in terms of weather. Lena and Bakari, people still talking about it here. A number of people coming up to me just saying how hard hit they were over the weekend. And by the way, the flooding that we saw in Mississauga over the weekend, pretty much the same thing happened about a month ago. People here wondering if they're going to experience it again this summer. We still have many weeks left. Back to you.
It was a wild weekend in Mississauga, that's for sure. Melissa Duggan reporting live tonight. Thank you, Melissa. And last month's flooding in this city, in Toronto, is estimated to have caused $940 million in insured damage.
Yeah, along with that, it has been quite the summer for Canada's insurers, who they've been impacted by floods, storms, and wildfires, as well as the recent tornado in Ayr and the water main break in Montreal. So last year, the Insurance Bureau of Canada paid out $3.1 billion in damages caused by severe weather. And for comparison, between 2001 and 2010, Canadian insurers, they averaged $675 million a year in weather-related losses.
It is now 5:35, 18 degrees. A dry drive home tonight. Might be a little slow, though. Adjouen Siayabwa, keeping a close eye on that.
I am. You know, some good news, Lena. We had a long-standing problems through an already very slow spot because of construction, which has reduced lanes. The lane that was blocked, it was the only lane, is available now. So it was on the westbound lanes of the 401. It was on the approach to the 410. Crews are dealing with a collision. Now they're moving the camera, but it did have the only lane that was getting by. They managed to clear that problem, but now it looks like we might be dealing with a new problem on the 401 westbound on the approach to the 410. It looks like a piece of the left lane is blocked, but this lane now that was blocked is available. Headed towards the Don Valley Parkway. Keep the good news rolling. Had a collision at northbound DVP north of Dundas in the left lane. It cleared, but we are dealing with problems on the westbound lanes of the Gardner just past Jameson. Stalled vehicle in the right lane. Very slow from Jarvis. On city streets, Danforth has reopened. It was closed between Pape and Jones following a serious collision, but a brand new collision on Bayview and Finch. I'll send it back to you both.
All right, Adjouen, thanks so much for this.
At a major downtown intersection, it is fully closed this week.
Yeah, work at Bloor and St. George. That'll take place every day from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. until August 26. The city says drivers should expect delays as traffic is diverted to nearby streets. Pedestrians and cyclists, they can still access the intersection.
My business has been affected for two solid years. Because if you're living outside of Toronto, or if you're living in Mississauga, hypothetically, why would you want to come to Toronto? How is Toronto inviting you and saying, please come here? Are we giving you a pass on parking? Are we making it easy for you to come here? How are we saying to people, please come?
I mean, when you look at the amount of people working along there, you know, if you come down to my job site down there, it's boom, 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 because it's all about getting it done and getting it done quickly so that we make money at it. This seems to be done at such a pace. I don't know what kind of pace they got going here.
Well, the work is part of a larger project along Bloor between Avenue and Spadina, which includes road reconstruction, asphalt replacement, accessibility upgrades, as well as permanent raised cycle tracks and a protected intersection.
It is now 5:37, 18 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
Workers at Canada's two major railways, they could be on strike or locked out as of Thursday. The latest on this developing labor news and potential impact straight ahead.
A Kensington Market building that was on the brink of collapse last week was declared unsafe a decade ago.
So the building on Dundas near Gaza, it had to be partially demolished after it started leaning on Friday. Records show that the owner was issued an order to fix it. This was in 2014 after an inspection found that various residential units were added to the building without a permit. Well, crews had to tear down the exterior walls and remove the roof. The city is now determining whether the remaining structure is safe.
The wall is cracked. Yeah. And that is at the morning, I wake up and I heard a very loud noise, and the wall is at a crack on border open, and we ran off of the building.
They smelled some kind of burning smoke or something, or saw some flames. But at the same time, the fact that if you look inside of the building, there's no burning residue.
A lot of these buildings are really unsafe.
Does that concern you?
It does, in a way, of course.
Now, firefighters were called to the scene at 10 o'clock Friday morning after construction workers in the area observed the sagging facade. No injuries were reported.
Well, a report on the crash of a Toronto Island ferry 2 years ago found several safety deficiencies.
The Transportation Safety Board concluded the Sam McBride ferry, which was carrying more than 900 passengers on August 20th, 2022, approached the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal at too high a speed and with only one propeller running, couldn't stop quick enough. More than a dozen people had minor injuries, mostly from slips or falls. The TSB made several recommendations, including better safety protocol and improved training for crew members.
The safety issues raised today are not new. Many of these issues have been found in other investigations of Canadian passenger vessels. Following one investigation in particular, the board raised concern about the lack of requirements for infant life jackets, the lack of assessment of passenger evacuation procedures, and the gap in training in passenger safety management.
We've seen a number of other occurrences involving passenger vessels, including ferries. And we've issued several concerns, again, touching on the same issues. And now here again, with the Sam McBride, we see the similar issues recurring. So that's why the board felt it important to issue new recommendations, because whatever actions that were taken in the past are not being applied consistently across the country, and more needs to be done to ensure that vessels like the Sam McBride and others across the country do take more steps to reduce the risk to passengers in the event of an emergency on board.
Now, the TSB did note that the city had already increased the size of the Sam McBride's crew and addressed passenger safety issues, including updating the pre-recorded safety briefings, adding additional signage, and warning passengers to not stand on the stairs while the vessel is moving.
Well, a possible work stoppage at Canada's two largest railroads, it could disrupt cross-border trade with the U.S.
Let's bring in CP24's Phil Perkins for a closer look at how this could impact you, and this could impact everything from small businesses in the country to transit commuters.
commuters, just regular people trying to get groceries, Lena and Bakari. So these are the two heavy hitters. You got CN Rail and Canadian Pacific Kansas City. They could be locked out / go on strike on Thursday if no deal is reached by then. And it seems like, despite them talking on the weekend, they're not any closer to getting a deal done. Now, this could be absolutely massive because never in this country's history have we had both of these massive rail groups on strike or on a lockout, a labor shortage, because normally they alternate their contract negotiations in terms of years, one after the other, so never at the exact same time. So here are the issues that are facing up to 10,000 of these unionized workers. So the CN workers, they're upset because there is a risk of them being moved across the country to try to fill some spots due to a labor shortage. So they could be in Vancouver one day and then Toronto the next. And then the CPKC workers are worried about safety issues, specifically fatigue, how they could be forced to stay awake longer, so have longer shifts, and they feel that that could have a risk of an increase in accidents. Now, here's where the ripple effect really takes place and could harm everybody, not just the workers here. So these rail lines move about $1 billion worth of cargo each day. They move everything from food, chemicals, cars, timber, and the stoppages have already started in anticipation of this work stoppage on Thursday, and that is not good for business. So with more, we heard from Sylvain Charlebois, the agri-food expert at Dalhousie University, and Dan Kelly, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business president. Here's what both experts had to say.
The railway system we have in Canada is the backbone of our agri-food economy. Everything is trucked, everything is railed at some point before that product actually hits store shelves. So obviously, if there is a labor dispute or a railway stoppage on Thursday, within days, you're probably going to start seeing some empty shelves.
Small businesses are doing what they can, but when we shut down things like ports and rail infrastructures or during protests, highways, there's not a lot that businesses can do in the short term to try to address this. We saw that certainly during the most recent rounds of port strikes, that you kind of have to just grit your teeth and bear it and accept the economic damage that happens during this, because you can't switch your supply chains on a dime. You really are quite reliant on them, and that's why this is so serious.
CN and CPKC did say that their rail lines in the U.S. Will still be operational if there is a work stoppage on Thursday. They do have connections in Chicago, New Orleans, Minneapolis, as well as Mexico in terms of CPKC. However, this will, of course, no doubt affect those connections if there is a work stoppage on Thursday. And while functionally for us, for the workers as well, this will cause a huge disruption for the country in terms of being a trusted partner in trade. It could actually start hurting our national reputation. Since 2012, there have been 5 work stoppages when it comes to our rail units here in this country. And, you know, your best ability is your availability, as they say in sports, guys. And if you're not available, you can't be counted on. Send it back to you.
So true. All right, Phil Perkins live in studio tonight. Phil, thanks so much for this.
No problem.
Now, a labor dispute at Canadian Pacific Kansas City would also affect some GO train commuters.
Okay, so Metrolink says that services on the Milton line and at Hamilton GO would be temporarily suspended due to the interruption of rail traffic services provided by CPKC. The agency says that there will be no impact on all other GO lines and the Up Express. It also says that a work stoppage at CN Railway would not affect GO trains or the Up Express. Metrolink says it's monitoring the situation closely and will keep customers informed.
It's 5:47, 18 degrees. This is Live at 5.
And coming up is day one of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. U.S. President Joe Biden will make a key speech tonight in front of an estimated 5,000 delegates.
Kamala Harris will officially secure the Democratic presidential nomination this week as the party gathers in Chicago for its national convention.
U.S. President Joe Biden will make a keynote speech tonight in front of an estimated 5,000 delegates at the United Center. Former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are expected to appear at the DNC later this week. Harris will close out the convention Thursday by formally accepting the Democratic nomination. And party members will also sign off on the Democratic platform. And Democratic National Convention Committee Executive Director Alex Hornbrook says that the gathering will also be about honoring President Biden's legacy.
His historic record of accomplishment with Vice President Harris by his side is unmatched by any presidential administration in modern history, and it's going to be our honor to spotlight and showcase the the accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration, as well as the bold vision for the future that Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and Democrats up and down the ticket will be fighting for this November.
So we are hearing from Chicago's mayor today, and Brandon Johnson says preparations have been made to make sure the DNC runs smoothly and safely. Take a listen.
And so people on the front line who continue to work, to our OEMC, to our firefighters, our EMTs, our Chicago police officers, and again, our streets and sanitation, I can name a bunch of everyday Chicagoans, transit, CTA, bus operators, train operators, who've all come together to respond to this moment, and we are ready.
Well, CTV News chief political correspondent Bashi Capellos is in Chicago and has more on the presidential race.
There's no escaping the fact that I think what we've all been able to witness north of the border, as well as people who are attending this convention, the race has fundamentally shifted in the last month since Joe Biden did make that decision to step aside. I was just saying earlier, like, I left the RNC thinking it's going to be almost impossible to beat Trump. Like, it felt like he had a lock on this thing because his voters were so incredibly motivated. Now Kamala Harris has, it seems, according to polling, closed that enthusiasm gap, which certainly, as I said, fundamentally changes the race.
And you've been looking at live images of the DNC, a lot of Democratic supporters gathering. This is now a live shot outside the building. This is where a number of demonstrators have been gathering for the last few hours. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators are calling on the Biden administration to stop providing arms to Israel. Many have been holding signs calling out the government's response to the ongoing war in Gaza. This has, of course, been a hot topic in American politics for several months now as this war drags on. A police line has been created to keep these demonstrators separated from another group of people waving Israeli flags. So those are counter demonstrators.
Make no mistake, Joe Biden can turn off that tap of money and funding immediately. He could do it right now. He could have done it back in October.
Well, here at home in Canada, a new Maru public opinion poll finds that nearly 2/3 of Canadians are following the race for the White House. A quarter of respondents say that they're doing so very closely. 40% see Kamala Harris as the front runner, while 20% believe former President Trump will return to the Oval Office. And 23% say that the race is too close to call, while 17% have no idea which candidate will win.
Well, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israel has accepted a proposal to bridge differences holding up a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza.
So he called on Hamas to do the same, without saying whether the latest draft had addressed concerns cited by the militant group. He also did not say whether the latest proposal addressed Israel's demands for control over 2 strategic corridors inside Gaza, which Hamas has said is a non-starter. Blinken spoke after the meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister today.
There's the fierce urgency of now. That's what I think we're all feeling. And we do see this as the best opportunity to finally get this over the finish line. We'll never give up on it, but the challenge is the longer this goes on, the more, again, hostages will suffer and possibly perish, and the more other things happen that could make things impossible. So that's why we're so intensely focused on getting this done and getting it done now.
And tomorrow, Blinken is expected to travel to Egypt and Qatar.
It's 5:55, 18 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And coming up, we'll tell you how Italy is trying to control tourism as numbers reach an all-time high.
Welcome back. Well, Italy is introducing new measures to try and crack down on chaos caused by tourists as visitor numbers reach an all-time high.
Well, temporary stoplights have been installed in cities like Rome, Florence, and Venice to limit people taking selfies and blocking traffic. Many popular beaches can now only be accessed by booking a spot through an app. And some are even planning to ban towels and chairs in the coming days. Italy's tourism minister is describing over-tourism as, quote, blasphemy.
Ooh. Well, today is World Orangutan Day.
Yeah, the great apes are called forest farmers as they play a key role in maintaining the biodiversity and health of their ecosystems. And the presence of orangutans in tropical rainforests, it's a sign of sustainability. But all three orangutan species are critically endangered, largely due to the palm oil industry, which is responsible for major deforestation in the world's orangutan habitat. The Toronto Zoo says that becoming informed and only buying items with sustainable palm oil can go a long way to protect orangutans.
It's now 5:59, 18 degrees. You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.